The Empire's bold move. The Galactic Empire had ruled over countless planets, its reach stretching far beyond what most could imagine. A massive fleet of warships, each bigger and more powerful than the last, hovered in space, ready to crush anything in its path. The Empire's leader, Emperor Crumble, had always believed that no one could challenge his power. His empire had defeated countless civilizations, leaving them in ruins, and he expected no different from Earth. For years, Earth had been watched from afar, its people seen as primitive and divided. The Empire believed that humans were too weak to stand against them. They thought humanity was nothing more than a scattered collection of nations, fighting among themselves. What they didn't know was that humans had something no empire could predict: unity when faced with a common enemy. In the Empire's grand strategy, Earth had always been a target, but it had never seemed urgent until now. Emperor Crumble had received word from his top commanders that Earth's technological advancements were quickly outpacing their own expectations. The humans had developed new weapons, some of which even the Empire had trouble understanding. So Crumble decided it was time to act. He would crush Earth before they could pose a real threat. His fleet, the largest ever assembled, set its course for Earth. Thousands of ships, with their metallic hulls gleaming in the void, moved together in perfect formation. Each ship was a fortress, bristling with advanced weaponry, shields, and soldiers trained to conquer and destroy. The Empire believed this overwhelming force would quickly end any human resistance. As the fleet approached Earth, its commanders began to boast of their victory. "These weak humans won't know what hit them," said General Walter, one of the Empire's top commanders. He laughed as he looked out at the fleet, confident in his men's superiority. He had led successful campaigns against dozens of civilizations, and Earth would be no different. Back on Earth, the leaders of humanity had no idea what was coming. They had seen occasional signs that something was happening in space, but nothing had prepared them for what the Empire had planned. When the first ships appeared in Earth's sky, the world was thrown into chaos. Panic spread across the globe as news of the alien invasion broke. But even in the chaos, something amazing began to happen. Across the world, human beings didn't scatter and hide. They began to unite. Governments and people who had once been at odds started working together. Scientists and engineers quickly got to work, building weapons and defenses from whatever they had. Military forces prepared for battle, despite knowing they were outmatched. On the Empire's flagship, the massive ship dreadnought, Emperor Crumble watched the live feed of Earth. He saw the humans' efforts to prepare, but he only smiled. "They will try," he said, his voice cold and sure. "But it will not matter. Nothing will stop us." He ordered his fleet to move into position, ready to launch the invasion. As the first wave of the Empire's forces landed on Earth, they didn't find a world ready to crumble under their might. Instead, they were greeted with resistance. Humans didn't run. They'd fought. The Empire's soldiers were stunned by the speed and ferocity of the human defense. The first battle, though small, was a victory for Earth's forces, and that victory sent a clear message to the Empire: humanity would not bow down easily. Yet, Crumble remained unmoved. "This is just the beginning," he muttered to himself. "Soon they will fall." But the seed of doubt had been planted. Despite his confidence, Crumble could no longer ignore the possibility that this would not be as easy as his previous conquests. He had underestimated Earth and its people, and in that moment, he began to feel the first stirrings of doubt. This was only the beginning of a battle that would change the fate of the Galactic Empire. But for now, the Empire's bold move had been made, and the first chapter in humanity's fight for survival had begun. The first clash. A surprising resistance. The Empire's invasion had begun, and Earth was in chaos. Cities were under attack, and alien forces spread across the planet. The Empire's advanced weapons, far superior to anything humanity had, tore through cities, leaving destruction in their wake. However, the invaders were in for a surprise. Despite their overwhelming power, the humans didn't give up. They fought back with everything they had. On the streets of New York, a group of soldiers armed with outdated rifles and makeshift armor faced off against the Empire's elite troops. The humans were outmatched, but they refused to back down. They used their knowledge of the terrain, hiding in buildings and launching surprise attacks. They fought with the desperation of a people who knew this was their last chance to survive. Meanwhile, in the jungles of South America, a group of resistance fighters had set up hidden traps. The Empire's soldiers, trained to fight in open fields, were caught off guard by the humans' guerrilla tactics. Explosions rocked the jungle as the humans launched ambushes, taking down several Empire soldiers. The Empire's commanders were baffled. "These humans are far more resourceful than we thought," one of them muttered, watching the chaos unfold on his screen. As the battle raged on, the Empire's forces began to realize something. They were not fighting a primitive species as they had believed. The humans were adapting quickly, using their environment to their advantage. The invaders had no idea how to handle such unpredictable tactics. This wasn't a war of advanced technology versus primitive tools. It was a war of minds. And humanity's determination and creativity began to show. In the skies above, the Empire's fleet continued its bombardment of Earth, trying to break the resistance. But human forces weren't sitting idly by. With the help of their scientists, they had quickly developed makeshift anti-aircraft weapons, forcing the Empire's ships to remain at high altitude. It wasn't enough to stop the Empire's attacks entirely, but it was enough to slow them down and buy the human resistance precious time. On the ground, small victories began to add up. The first major battle, fought in a city known for its sprawling docks, saw the humans manage to sabotage several of the Empire's supply ships. It wasn't a massive win, but it sent a clear message. Earth wasn't going down without a fight. The Empire's invasion had been slowed, and the soldiers stationed on Earth were starting to question their mission. They had never expected this level of resistance. Back on the Empire's flagship, Emperor Crumble watched in disbelief. His fleet had been delayed by a few days, and some of his commanders were beginning to show signs of frustration. "This cannot be happening," he growled, slamming his fist against the command center's table. "They are nothing but weak insects. Crush them." But despite his anger, he knew deep down that something was wrong. The humans' resistance was not just stubborn, it was smart. They were fighting not just with weapons, but with strategy, with the kind of clever thinking that even the Empire's highly trained soldiers had trouble understanding. Crumble had thought Earth would be an easy conquest. Now, he wasn't so sure. On the battlefield, General Walter, the Empire's top military leader, was beginning to feel the pressure. His forces had encountered more resistance than he had ever faced before. The humans, though outnumbered, had a strange strength. They were fierce and unpredictable, never giving the Empire soldiers the advantage they had been trained to expect. "I've never seen anything like this," General Walter said, as another Empire convoy was ambushed and destroyed by human forces. "These humans, they fight like they have nothing to lose." While the battle on Earth raged, humanity's leaders worked tirelessly to organize a unified resistance. Nations set aside their differences, pooling their resources to fight the common enemy. Even the most advanced military forces on Earth, once divided by borders, came together under a single banner: the survival of the human race. The resistance fighters were no longer just soldiers. They were heroes. And it was in these early moments of conflict that humanity's true strength was revealed, not in their weapons, but in their ability to adapt, to think outside the box, and to unite in the face of impossible odds. Each small victory, each battle won, pushed the Empire closer to a breaking point. The Empire's pride was beginning to crack, and they knew their once certain victory was no longer guaranteed. Emperor Crumble, from his throne in the vast command room of the dreadnought, was becoming more furious by the minute. He had sent his best forces to Earth, yet they were being outsmarted and outmaneuvered by a race he had once considered inferior. "We will not lose to these humans," Crumble muttered, trying to regain his composure. "We will crush them. We must." But as the human resistance grew stronger and bolder with each passing day, Krovox's confidence began to waver. The first clash had been nothing like what he had expected, and for the first time in his life, the mighty Galactic Empire was faced with the possibility that it might not be invincible after all. The Empire's overconfidence turns to doubt. As the days passed, the Empire's forces continued to clash with the human resistance across Earth. But something strange was happening. Despite their superior technology, the Empire's soldiers were beginning to lose ground. The humans had proven themselves to be more than just survivors. They were thinkers. They adapted quickly, using the Empire's own tactics against them, turning each battle into a test of strategy rather than raw power. On the Dreadnought, Emperor Krovox paced back and forth in his war room. He could not understand why the humans were putting up such a strong fight. His fleet had decimated countless civilizations in the past, and yet Earth had turned into a thorn in his side. "Why are they not breaking?" he demanded, his voice filled with frustration. His chief advisor, Commander Zolthor, stood at attention. "Sire, their resistance is unlike anything we've encountered before. They've learned to use their environment, their cities, and even their own weaknesses against us. It's unexpected. I don't care about their tactics." Krovox shouted. "Crush them. They are nothing more than insects beneath our boot." But despite his anger, Krovox knew there was something he wasn't seeing. The humans weren't just fighting. They were learning. It wasn't just their guerrilla tactics. They had started to employ hit-and-run strategies, using their limited resources to strike where the Empire's forces were weakest. The humans were resourceful, unpredictable, and above all, they were relentless. In the past week alone, several of the Empire's warships had been damaged in surprise attacks. The humans had created a series of makeshift weapons, simple things like explosive devices and electromagnetic disruptors, that managed to disable the Empire's advanced technology. One of the Empire's most powerful dreadnoughts had been forced to retreat after its weapon systems were disabled by a homemade human EMP device. The shockwaves of that failure reverberated throughout the Empire's chain of command. "This cannot be happening," General Walter muttered to himself as he stared at a screen showing the latest battle reports. His face was pale, and his hands trembled. He had never been defeated so thoroughly before. He had assumed the invasion would be over within days, with Earth's forces scattering in fear. Instead, they had begun to push back. Human ingenuity had taken the Empire by surprise, and now it seemed that the more they fought, the more they learned. "General," one of his subordinates said, breaking his concentration, "the human forces are regrouping near the old ruins of New Berlin. They're preparing for another attack." "Another one?" Walter asked, his voice filled with disbelief. He thought about the relentless attacks the humans had launched in the past few days. It wasn't supposed to be like this. They weren't supposed to stand their ground. He had expected an easy victory, but what he was witnessing was something far different. A desperate, angry fight that didn't make sense. "We need to crush them now, or we'll lose everything." Back on Earth, the human resistance was growing bolder. The victories, though small, had sparked something powerful in the hearts of Earth's people. Nations that had once fought each other began to come together. The once fractured alliances were now unified under one common cause: to defend their planet and protect their future. Scientists, engineers, and military leaders from all over the world pooled their knowledge and resources, devising new ways to fight back. In a hidden bunker beneath the ruins of New Berlin, the resistance leaders gathered to discuss their next move. "We've made progress," said Colonel Maria Sanchez, the leader of the human forces in the region. "But we need to keep pushing. The Empire is starting to question their own superiority. We can use that." "I've seen it myself," said Lieutenant John Cross, an intelligence officer. "The Empire's fleet is starting to break down. Their ships are damaged, and their troops are getting frustrated. They're not used to being challenged like this." Maria nodded. "It's not enough to just survive. We need to make them doubt everything they know. We need them to realize that humanity won't fall, no matter how powerful they are. We've got them on the ropes. We just need to strike when they least expect it. Meanwhile, the Empire's command center was a place of growing unease. General Valter's reports were becoming more troubling with every passing hour. The human resistance had not only survived but was thriving. The Empire's warships had become vulnerable to human strikes, and the Empire's leaders began to ask themselves questions they hadn't even considered before. Could it be that the humans were not as weak as they had believed? Could it be that the Empire was not as invincible as they had thought? Emperor Cravox continued to hold his composure in front of his commanders. But deep down, the doubt was starting to gnaw at him. Every battle they lost, every surprise attack that crippled his fleet, made him question his earlier confidence. The Empire had never faced a force like this before, and Cravox didn't know how to stop it. "Send more troops," he barked, though his voice lacked its usual power. "Do whatever it takes to crush them. I will not be defeated by mere humans." But inside his mind, the seed of doubt had been planted. The Empire's forces were powerful, yes, but something had changed. The humans were not only fighting for survival, they were fighting for something far greater. And with each victory, the Empire's grip on Earth seemed to slip further away. Humanity's rally. A plan for retaliation. As the Empire's grip on Earth began to loosen, humanity's resolve only grew stronger. The resistance forces, once scattered and disorganized, were now united with a common purpose. Every victory, no matter how small, had sparked a fire within the hearts of Earth's people. The planet, once divided by borders and disagreements, now stood as one, ready to face the might of the Galactic Empire. In underground bunkers and secret military bases across the globe, resistance leaders and military strategists came together. Colonel Maria Sanchez, the head of the human resistance, stood in front of a large holographic map of Earth, showing the Empire's movements. Around her, military leaders from every corner of the world gathered, their eyes filled with determination. "The Empire may have underestimated us," Maria began, her voice steady. "But we've shown them that we won't back down. We fought them in the streets, in the jungles, and in the skies. But now, it's time to strike back, not just defend ourselves, but to take the fight to them." There was a murmur of agreement from the others. The humans knew they had only one chance to turn the tide of the war. With every passing day, the Empire's forces grew more entrenched, and their supply lines became longer and more vulnerable. Now was the moment to act. "We've learned a lot from our past victories," Maria continued. "The Empire's arrogance is their greatest weakness. They think they're untouchable, but they're not invincible. We've seen that. We've taken down their ships, we've disrupted their supply chains, and we've crippled their forces one battle at a time. But now we need to hit them where it hurts most." Lieutenant John Cross, the intelligence officer, stepped forward. "I've gathered information on the Empire's main supply routes. They're relying on a series of central hubs to keep their fleet running. If we can take out these hubs, we can disrupt their entire operation. Without their supply lines, their invasion will grind to a halt." The room fell silent as everyone took in this new strategy. The idea of attacking the Empire's supply lines had been considered before, but now, it seemed like the most viable option. If they could cripple the Empire's logistical network, they could force their enemy into retreat. The problem was, the supply hubs were heavily guarded and located deep within Empire-controlled territories. This would be no easy task. "We don't have the numbers to take them head-on," Maria said. "But we don't need to. We need to use their arrogance against them. We've learned their patterns, we've studied their weaknesses. We'll strike fast, hit hard, and then vanish before they can retaliate." General David Harrington, a battle-hardened leader from the European forces, added, "We have the element of surprise on our side. They think we're just a ragtag bunch of fighters, nothing more. But we're better than they think. We've got the skill, the technology, and now we have the unity to take them down." The resistance leaders began to map out the details of the operation. Their plan was risky, but it was their best shot at turning the tide. The human forces would launch coordinated attacks on the Empire's supply hubs, cutting off vital resources and forcing the Empire to spread its forces thin. They would use everything at their disposal: high-tech weapons, sabotage, and their unmatched knowledge of the terrain. The Empire would never see it coming. While the plans were being made, the Empire's leadership was in disarray. Emperor Crumble, despite his earlier confidence, had begun to lose his grip on the situation. The human resistance was no longer a nuisance. It was a serious threat. His commanders had been defeated in battle after battle. And now, he had to deal with the fact that his own fleet was growing weaker with every passing day. In the command room of the dreadnought, Crumble paced angrily, his eyes burning with frustration. How did this happen? He muttered to himself. How did they manage to fight back so effectively? His advisors remained silent, unwilling to challenge him. They've learned our weaknesses, one of his generals finally said. They've attacked our supply lines, disabled our ships, and forced us to retreat from several key locations. We've underestimated them. Crumbal's face twisted with rage. We will not let this continue. They think they can win. They think they can stand against the might of the Galactic Empire. He slammed his fist on the table, sending a shockwave through the room. We will show them the full power of our forces. We will crush them. But even as he spoke, the seed of doubt lingered in his mind. The humans were not fighting like they were desperate. They were fighting like they had something to prove. And in every battle, they seemed to grow stronger. Crumble was beginning to realize that this wasn't going to be a simple conquest. This was becoming a war for survival, and humanity was proving to be a formidable enemy. On Earth, the human resistance was ready. Their plan had been set in motion, and they would strike when the Empire least expected it. The time for defense was over. The humans were no longer simply trying to hold their ground. They were taking the fight to the enemy. The first wave of attacks came swiftly. Small, highly trained teams infiltrated the Empire's supply hubs, sabotaging their systems and planting explosives in critical locations. In the skies, human-made fighter jets soared, hitting Empire ships with pinpoint accuracy. The attacks were fast and precise, leaving the Empire struggling to respond. As the Empire's supply lines began to crumble, Crumble felt the pressure mount. For the first time since the invasion began, he was starting to worry. The human resistance wasn't just holding on, they were winning. And the more they won, the more the Empire's position weakened. The unexpected victory. Humans strike back. The Empire's once unshakable confidence was beginning to crack. As humanity's counterattacks continued, the massive war machines of the Galactic Empire, once considered invincible, were faltering. The supply hubs, essential to the Empire's war effort, were being destroyed one by one. With each successful strike, the Empire's grip on Earth loosened further, and for the first time, they were on the defensive. Back on Earth, the resistance fighters were riding a wave of success. The sabotage missions had been more successful than anyone had dared to hope. Human ingenuity had taken down one of the Empire's largest fuel depots in the Arctic Circle, crippling the Empire's ability to send reinforcements. A fleet of Empire warships, stranded due to fuel shortages, was now easy prey for human attacks. Even though the humans had fewer resources, their ability to adapt, think on their feet, and use the terrain to their advantage had turned the tide in ways the Empire had never expected. At the Resistance's Central Command, Colonel Maria Sanchez stood before a large screen, watching the latest reports from the field. Her eyes gleamed with pride as she read the updates. "We're doing it," she muttered to herself. "We're actually doing it." The attacks on the Empire's supply lines had not only disrupted their operations, but had caused significant damage to their morale. The Empire's soldiers, who had once marched across planets with ease, were now questioning their mission. They couldn't understand how the humans, so technologically inferior, had managed to pull off such decisive victories. In the sky, Human-made fighter jets, equipped with repurposed technology and cutting-edge weapons, were now engaging Empire warships at a level of precision that even the Empire's best pilots couldn't ignore. They were a force to be reckoned with. The first major fleet engagement had ended with the destruction of one of the Empire's capital ships, the dreadnought Reaver. It had been crippled by a combination of human ingenuity and sheer willpower, a blow that sent shockwaves through the Empire's command. On the Empire's flagship, the dreadnought, Emperor Kruvok stood frozen before a holographic display of the battlefield. He watched in disbelief as the reports came in. His mighty fleet, which had once seemed unstoppable, was now being battered by small, unpredictable forces of humans. The Reaver, his pride and joy, was gone, destroyed in a surprise attack by human forces. It had been their first major loss since the invasion began, and it rattled him to his core. "This is impossible," Kruvok muttered under his breath, staring at the holographic map. "How can this be happening?" Commander Zulfor, still loyal but clearly uneasy, spoke up. "Sire, the humans have struck at our supply chains, and their attacks are becoming more coordinated. We've been forced to recall several fleets to defend our supply routes. They're not just defending. They're going on the offensive. Damn them." Kruvok roared, slamming his fist on the command table. "We are the Galactic Empire. We do not lose." But even as he shouted, the truth settled in. The Empire was losing. Slowly, but surely, the humans were turning the tide. The once overconfident Emperor began to see the true scope of the disaster unfolding. The resistance had become a legitimate force. The humans, it seemed, had found a way to fight back with a strength and cunning that had thrown the Empire into chaos. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human resistance celebrated their victory, but they were not foolish enough to think the war was over. Their successes were meaningful, but they were only the first steps. Humanity had managed to strike back, but the Empire was still powerful, and they knew the full might of their enemy was still out there, waiting to retaliate. Colonel Maria Sanchez gathered her commanders in the central command room, their faces tired but filled with hope. "We've taken down a capital ship," she said, her voice steady. "But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. We need to keep up the pressure. The Empire is wounded, and now is our chance to finish what we started." John Cross, the intelligence officer, stepped forward. "We've learned so much from their tactics. We know how to strike when they're vulnerable, and we know where their weaknesses lie. The next phase of our plan is even more dangerous, but it's our best shot." Sanchez nodded. "We're not just defending anymore. We're fighting for our future. We will keep pushing until they can't fight back." The war was far from over, but humanity's victory in this first phase of the conflict sent a clear message to the Empire. Earth would not fall. The humans were not as weak as the Empire had believed. They were more than just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with. And for the first time in a long while, Emperor Kruvok began to feel something he had never experienced before: fear. The final showdown, the Empire's humiliation. The war had reached its climax. The once mighty Galactic Empire, which had swept through countless worlds with ease, was now on the brink of collapse. Earth's resistance had transformed from a mere nuisance into a full-blown offensive force. The Empire's leaders, who had once believed that humanity would crumble before their power, were now scrambling to salvage what remained of their invasion. It was a moment of reckoning, and the final battle was about to unfold. In the Empire's war room aboard the dreadnought, Emperor Kruvok stood before a giant display, his face pale with frustration. His empire was crumbling, and he knew it. The human resistance had managed to destroy 2 more of the Empire's capital ships in recent days, and now they had gathered their forces for one final strike. Kruvok had summoned his best commanders to the war room, hoping for some sign of a solution. "Tell me we still have a chance," Kruvok demanded, his voice cold and filled with bitterness. Commander Zulfor, his chief advisor, bowed his head. "Sire, the humans have proven to be more resourceful than we anticipated. Their tactics are unpredictable, But we still have one advantage. They are not as numerous as we are. If we can strike at their command center, we can end this war. Strike at their command center. Crumble scoffed. They're hiding in the ruins. They've already shown that they can move quickly and strike with precision. We cannot risk another failure. But Zolthor was insistent. We must take that risk. The humans have made us look weak in front of our own soldiers. We cannot let this rebellion continue. Crumbal's anger flared. He could no longer hide his growing fear. His empire was losing, and it was all because of the humans' relentless will to fight. Very well. Prepare the fleet. We will strike at their last stronghold. This ends now. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human resistance was preparing for the final confrontation. Colonel Maria Sanchez stood in a command room filled with maps and screens showing the Empire's movements. The time had come to end the war. The human forces had gathered their strength for one last push. This would be their most dangerous mission, but it was also their only chance to ensure the survival of their species. We've learned everything we need to know, Maria said, her voice steady. The Empire is vulnerable. Their supply lines are stretched thin, and their fleet is weakened, but they still have the firepower to cause us serious damage. We're going to have to hit them fast, and we're going to have to hit them hard. Her team nodded in agreement. The final battle was about to begin, and every fighter, every soldier, and every resistance leader knew this was their moment to prove that humanity was stronger than the Empire's overwhelming power. The human forces launched their attack in the dead of night. They struck from multiple fronts, using their knowledge of the terrain and the Empire's weaknesses to their advantage. Their strategy was simple but effective. Force the Empire into a corner, and then overwhelm them with every resource at their disposal. The Empire's forces, though powerful, had already suffered so much that their response was slower and more disorganized. In the skies, human-made fighter jets, now equipped with advanced weaponry, clashed with the Empire's remaining warships. The dogfights were intense, but the humans had learned how to use their smaller, more agile ships to outmaneuver the Empire's massive battle cruisers. Their attacks were quick and precise, aimed at the Empire's weak points, and they succeeded in taking down more ships, pushing the Empire's forces back. The battle on the ground was no less fierce. Resistance fighters, armed with makeshift explosives and high-tech weapons, engaged in close combat with Empire soldiers. The once proud Empire soldiers, now fighting in unfamiliar and hostile terrain, were caught off guard by the human resistance's speed and unpredictability. The human fighters, driven by their love for their planet and their people, fought with a desperation that the Empire's forces could not match. And then the moment arrived. The Empire's command ship, the Dreadnought, was now the target of the human resistance's final strike. It was heavily guarded, but the humans had one final surprise in store for the Empire. Using a combination of decoy attacks and precision strikes, they'd managed to infiltrate the Empire's defenses and planted explosives on the Dreadnought's critical systems. As the timer on the explosives ticked down, the humans watched in tense silence. The Dreadnought, the symbol of the Empire's might, was about to be destroyed. The moment the explosives detonated, the ship erupted in a blinding explosion, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The Empire's fleet, disoriented and in chaos, began to retreat in disarray. Emperor Crumble, watching from the bridge of his remaining flagship, could only stare in horror. His greatest weapon had been destroyed, and the final humiliation had begun. The humans had beaten him. They had taken everything he had thrown at them and turned it into victory. The Galactic Empire, once thought unstoppable, was now defeated. The remaining Empire forces, their morale shattered and their fleet in ruins, began to surrender. The humans had achieved what was once thought impossible. They had driven the Galactic Empire from their planet and secured their future. For the first time in his life, Emperor Crumble tasted the bitter sting of defeat. He had underestimated humanity, and now he was paying the price. The once immense power of the Empire was reduced to nothing more than a memory. The humans had proven that no matter how great the enemy, no matter how impossible the odds, humanity could rise to the challenge and claim victory. As the dust settled and the last of the Empire's forces retreated, Maria Sanchez and her team stood together, looking out at the burning ruins of the Empire's fleet. They had won. Humanity had won. And with that victory, a new chapter in human history began. The aftermath. A new era for humanity. The war was over. The once feared Galactic Empire, which had swept through the stars with unmatched might, lay in ruins. Its fleets were shattered, its leaders in disarray, and its forces scattered across the galaxy. The humans had won, against all odds, and they had proven something that would echo through the universe for generations. Humanity would never be crushed, no matter the adversary. As the last remnants of the Empire retreated into the cold reaches of space, Earth began to recover. Cities that had once been destroyed by the Empire's attacks were slowly rebuilt. The landscape, scared by battles, started to heal as nations came together to restore what had been lost. The world, forever changed by the invasion, now stood united, stronger than ever before. Colonel Maria Sanchez, the hero who had led humanity's resistance, stood before the United Nations as they celebrated their victory. Her face was tired, yet there was a sense of pride in her eyes. She had seen countless lives lost in this struggle, and while she celebrated the triumph, she also mourned the price of victory. The scars of war would not fade easily, but humanity had emerged victorious.